Calico fans, this is H.H. German from Sigma Comics coming to you from the greatest city in the world. It's New York City. And you know what time it is. It's another great video. Before we get into that, I'm going to ask you to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button because it does help us out. And of course, it's at this time that I like to take a good shot from the Calico mug. Good stuff, as always. All right, let's get into it. Mike Baron. Mike Baron is unequivocally a comic book legend. Mike Baron is, in my view, in the view of many, one of the people that helped to put the Punisher on the map, if not the person. All right? And let me tell you why. The Punisher is one of many characters that Mike Baron has worked on, but you know what? I'm gonna tell you about his work on the Punisher a little later because there's so much to Mike Baron's body of work that we don't even have to start there. The reason why I'm a big fan of Mike Baron is because, see, I came to know of Mike Baron as a fan from reading the comics that he wrote back in the 80s, the late 80s and early 90s. The Punisher series. Mike wrote the Punisher Unlimited series from issue 1 to around the mid 60s, around there. So that's a good 5 years run, and only taking a few breaks here and there. But he was the Punisher guy. Again, Mike, I certainly credit him with being the one who put the Punisher on the map. And Jerry Conway created the character of the Punisher back in the 70s, and it was really Mike Baron that came in and made him a fixture. So that's really what got me interested in Mike Baron as a kid. Again, I was a teenager reading this. So as an adult, fast forwarding into the 2020s, in 2020, when I started reading comics in preparation to entering the comic book industry and assessing what was out there at the time. This is mid-2020. I started the creative process, and the end result was Here Comes Calico issue 1. And that was at the end of 2020, so that by the first quarter of 2021, I already had a book and another on the way with issue 2. And that was enough for me to to start getting feedback from our new audience of Here Comes Calico. And one of the things that I would hear consistently was, man, this is reminding me of the Punisher from back in the 90s. And if you read a lot of the articles out there, you'll hear the reference. You'll come across that reference very often, that Hector Gil Calico reminds all of these writers, reporters of Frank Castle, the Punisher. And not just any Punisher, but Mike Baron's Punisher. And that is something that I heard a lot. And it wasn't until someone came over and sent me an email about a character by the name of the Badger. And I'd never heard of this character before. Of course, I heard of Mike Baron, but I didn't know that Mike Baron was the creator of the Badger. And when I saw Mike Baron on a video on YouTube, and it was a live video stream, I bought a super chat and said, hey, I directed my super chat at Mike Baron. This was a panel of a lot of different creators, but my inquiry was to Mike Baron. And they say, hey, Mr. Baron, your name comes up very often as someone who, my work reminds our audience of, and be very appreciative if you can let me know how to get my hands on the Badger, because that seems to be a character that the audience is referencing. So he responded right away and said, yeah, I can get you in contact with, I can send some copies your way. And he sent me a bunch of them, and I read them. I said, wow, this is good stuff. And come to find out that that's really what inspired Carl Potts. That series was what inspired Carl Potts to put him him being, of course, Mike Baron on the Punisher series. Because, man, let me tell you, this Badger character was packed quite a while. And I recommend you guys in the audience who are Mike Baron fans and or fans of, action comics, you guys are going to love the Badger. If you can get your hands on it, do a search for the Badger, Mike Baron, and I think you might find some trades on Amazon. It's likely. Otherwise, consult your local comic book shop. That's always the best way. They might actually have some Badger copies on hand. But I have issues 1 through I think 12 or 15 of the Badger. I bought, and then I bought some other issues, so I got quite a few of them. And man, what a series! And the fans were right. They said this character, and there was some similarities there, and definitely some similarities with Hector Gil the Calico. And just that process of speaking to Mike and purchasing the comics directly from him, because I actually bought the comics directly from Mike, and that's one of the instead of just tossing me to buy the comics somewhere, he appreciated the perspective I had. My perspective was more as a creator, inquiring about the work, the Badger, for inspiration in my creative project. So I think that's really why it was more of a hands-on approach for him. And of course, the truth is that the Badger was never a mainstream character, right? He's an independent character. I think he was put out on a couple of different labels. So the truth is that both from a practical perspective and just a hands-on creator to creator perspective, it made sense for to Mike to deal directly with me, and I appreciate him for that. And that process, in that process, we became very friendly with one another, and to the point now where we are certainly friends. And he's a mentor to me, and certainly I credit with giving me some guidance on the character Hector Gil the Calico, and I certainly very much appreciate him for this. Wonderful person, very generous with his time. We've gotten to the point where we've done shows together. We did a Colorado show together in the same booth, so we partnered up and we worked directly together. And what a wonderful experience and a rewarding experience that was for me. This is someone who I truly care about and have deep affection for, is a wonderful friend, and certainly someone I admire, respect, and look up to on every level. And folks, if you're just tuning in, this is a video about Mike Baron and the legendary Mike Baron. Mike Baron has his name on just legendary projects like Star Wars, the Marvel project back in the 80s, Star Wars comic book series, The Flash, incredibly talented writer on The Flash, some memorable storylines there for The Flash, a lot of huge, just a huge fan base of The Flash. Love Mike Baron for his time on the book, and just a host of others, including the most important of which for me was The Punisher. The Punisher was, Mike Baron's Punisher for me was it. It was the it book, and it certainly had that it factor. I picked up The Punisher in the late 80s, early 90s, and I read it all through the end of 92. And of course, I went to college in 93, and by that time I was just, was fighting at a very high level, and I just didn't have time between the studies and the working and the boxing. It's just I had no time for anything, frankly. I used to play video games too back then, and I had to drop that like a bad habit. I was a huge fan of video games and comics, and I couldn't do it. Didn't have any time for it. The only time I did have for it was on the weekends, and that's really when I would do periodic visiting of a comic book shop. The school I went to, there were quite a few comic book shops around, so I was able to get some time in. And at that time, I was reading things like Spawn, and I'd go in and pick up a Punisher book here and there. But I don't think that by that time Mike was on the books. I think Chuck Dixon took over, another great, talented writer as well. In fact, Chuck Dixon himself credits Mike Baron with being the person who really put the Punisher on the map, so to speak. So, and I certainly agree with that. Chuck Dixon has said that before on his show, Ask Chuck Dixon, which all of you should tune into. If you guys are writers, any writers in the audience, if you want to get hands-on instruction and just overall great comic talk from a writer's perspective on comics, I mean, you can't do better than Ask Chuck Dixon. And of course, Mike Barron's channel. Head over to Mike Barron's channel as well. And all you got to do is do a search for Mike Barron on YouTube, and you'll get over to his channel. And when you're over there, hit the like on his videos and hit subscribe so you can be informed on when his videos come out. He usually does a weekly video, and all of his videos are instructional and wonderful video series. Those are two videos I never miss: the Mike Barron's video series on YouTube. Love that channel, and also Chuck Dixon, Ask Chuck Dixon channel, and you can just do a search on both of them. So there it is, folks. Mike Barron, true legend of the comic book industry. Again, I mentioned a few titles: Star Wars, The Flash, The Punisher, and also some indie creative projects. Mike Barron created the Badger. He's also behind one of the characters, one of the creators behind Nexus. That's another book that you can find Mike Barron writing exclusively. I'm pretty sure exclusively. And just a wonderful, inspirational figure and fixture of comics. To speak a little bit more on Mike Barron, I'll say this, and I typically stay away from talking about people and politics, but he was done in a bad way in comics, and it's something that I very much disagree with. I'm a New York City guy, and let's just say, Mike Barron is someone who, is very passionate about his views on the world. And in the world of comics, I guess, these days, you can't have that. People have gotten very much, encircled in their political bubbles, if you will. And if you have a perspective that isn't necessarily in line with the mainstream in comics, then you're ostracized these days. That's what's happening these days in comics, and it's really unfortunate. And it's not just happening in comics; it's happening in everywhere in pop culture, movies, film, shows. It's everything. It's everything creative, and I really think that's unfortunate, because there was a time where we could sit down and talk and have different perspectives and just be creators and create. And unfortunately, Mike's views on the world they tend to be a little outside of the mainstream, and as a result, he's not working for the big two these days. But you know what? Frankly, the condition the big two is in these days, it's it's not probably for the best. It is for the best. And my understanding is he's doing better now than he did ever. And I'm extremely happy to know that. And I very much encourage you to support his projects. I think he has a website called MikeBarron.com, if I'm not mistaken. Or just type in Mike Barron on Google, and you should be able to go to his website. He has another series called The Florida Man, and that's a really fun series. Very fun. The show that we did there in Colorado, he sold out of that. That was the first thing he sold out of, the Florida Man series. Wow. That is super fun, really funny, and just a great book. And he's doing very well with that book. He's doing very well in general. But I think you guys should really check him out. He's got some really good stuff. He's a legend. He's also my friend. Check him out on Google. Search Mike Barron, writer Mike Barron. Folks, that's it for today. This has been another Sigma Comics video from yours truly, H.H. German. You know what we do. We love comics and we love animals. So what do? Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget, we do have Here Comes Calico issue 8 on Kickstarter right now. And we've got issue 7 right here, Escape from the Bronx. Wonderful issue here, covered by Garner Biel. writing by yours truly. And go to Kickstarter, type in Here Comes Calico, and pick up a set. Pick up 1, 2, whatever you want. You're gonna love it. All right, guys. When you do, you help us in our fight against animal abuse. So, guys, keep on fighting for animals.